Hi everyone, welcome back to Novel Idea. I'm going to apologize up front for the background noise. I have to film when I can and the dishwasher was already going and I can't stop it easily without it beeping at me and doing different things. So we're gonna let it run. Hopefully it's not too distracting. And we are going to do a week in review. Okay, so I managed to finish 4 books this last week. And those books were pretty good reading. I really enjoyed it. So the first one, let's jump in. The first one that I finished was Underland by Robert MacFarlane. And this is one that I was reading for NonFiction November. And I am going to stick this with the prompt of web. The reason for that is because he talks about all different kinds of slightly unnerving things beneath our feet. So we, go around walking on the crust of the earth, not really thinking too much about what is underneath. I thought that this was mainly going to be about the ancient woodlands and kind of the way that the root systems work with one another and talk to each other basically. And he does cover that, but that is not the only thing that he covers. He also goes into the catacombs and goes into kind of the underground sewer system of Paris. And he also goes into glacial ice caves. His writing is impeccable. The way he tells a story, it's very lyrical. I ended up giving this a lower score than I expected to because of the fact that I wanted more about the ancient forest. That's kind of what's indicated on the front cover, and that's really what I wanted. And the catacombs and the sewer system were interesting to me. The catacombs more so. But the sewer system and the ice caves, not quite so much. And yet there were entire chapters on both of those things. And it's just not what I wanted. And so that's the reason why it got a lower score from me than what I was expecting to give it. I thought it was gonna be, right up there in the 90th percentile. And this was more in the low 80s for me. Then I finished The Toll by Neal Shusterman. Tiffany is still reading this, and so I'm not gonna do much of a review on it besides it's book 3. Other than to say I was a little disappointed with the way that Neal Shusterman ended this saga. And so for me, this again just ended up in the low 80s, which is still great, but it's just not up to the level of the other 2 books. And maybe I'll go into more detail about that later and we'll talk about like the whole series. But for right now, because Tiffany hasn't finished it yet and I don't really want to talk too much more about it, I'm just gonna say that I think he could have done so much better than it was done. Not that I disliked some of his choices, but there were quite a few choices that I just couldn't get behind them. So the toll. Then I finished Combat Codes by Alexander Darwin. This is a reread for me, and I reread it because I was not quite sure that I was remembering things correctly. And so I reread this in hopes of kind of refreshing some things. I know book 2 is either due out or it is out. And I really enjoyed this book. And so I wanted to make sure that I was remembering things well. And I was. So let me tell you a little bit about Combat Codes. Combat Codes is the Combat Codes themselves. Let's start there. They are kind of the governing scriptures of the lives of a certain, I don't know if I would call them a race, but that's kind of how they come across. They come across as a certain race of people, like mixed martial arts type fighters. And the reason that they are this way is because they have formed an armistice with another race of people who are technologically advanced. They were at war with one another. And so they formed this armistice, and their main combat code that they live by now is grievers fight so that others don't have to. And so their whole life, grievers are the race of MMA kind of fighters, and their whole life is fighting. That's why they're alive. They say that. That's why we're alive. That's what we live for, is to fight. It's brutal. Alexander Darwin tells this in a way that is relational. And that is what I love about this book, because I'm not into fighting. I don't like it. I don't like blood and guts. I don't like hearing about, broken bones and other things that happen. But what I love is the way that he sets this story up so that everything about the fighting is completely relational. We have our main character. His name is Seago, and he's a very young boy when the book opens, and he is in the underworld of this world and is taken into a slave house and is thrown into ring after ring after ring with other fighters, and all of the fighters that are down there are hoping that they survive long enough and win enough matches that they catch the eye of a scout from the combat school. The combat school is called the Lyceum, and it has a series of tests that you have to go through before you are accepted into the school to become a griever. So Seago is in the underworld, and he is fighting in these rings, and the rings are created of a alloy of some sort that attracts these elementals to it that affect the way that the perceptions of the fighters and the actions of the fighters can be altered. And so they have to mentally and emotionally fight against something, and they also have to physically fight against someone. So Seago gets discovered by an older griever who is no longer fighting, and he is scouting for the school, and he gets sees Seago and wants to bring him into the school because he sees in him something of the old school kind of thing. So Murray is no longer fighting because he no longer is seeing them holding to these combat codes, holding to these governing scriptures for griever knights. He's afraid that the combat codes are not truly governing any longer. And when he sees Seago, he wants to bring him in. And Seago is more than willing to do that. This book has so many surprise moments and so many mysterious kind of questions. Where did Seago come from? What's his past? Where did Murray's mentor go? Just all of these other questions that are in it. But the main thing is that Seago has this heart that just really wants to see those around him succeed. And he's kind, and yeah, I just really, really enjoyed this book. I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to reread it. So, Combat Codes, Alexander Darwin. Book 2 is due out soon if it hasn't already come out. And I'm really looking forward to reading it. I really hope he doesn't do us dirty and give us something that is so disappointing after such a great beginning. And then lastly, I read Now in November. This I read with Priscilla from the Evening Reader, and it was amazing. Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading is the one that put this on my radar, and I'm so thankful that she did. I also heard about it from Kim from Middle of the Book March, but Kelly is the one that put it on my radar to begin with. And after hearing her talk about it, I thought it sounded very kind of Willa Cather to me, and I wanted to see if it measured up, basically. And boy, did it. I don't think that it is as... I think that Willa Cather, the way that she writes, it feels a little more uplifting. It's not necessarily always that way. You always tend to dislike at least one character in a Willa Cather story. But there's something that's positive, it's forward momentum. With Now in November, it covers just a 10-year block in this young girl's life. It's so beautifully written. So we are following a family who has lost money. It's about to enter into the Great Depression, post-World War I America. We go back to a family farm. It seems like it was owned by the family in previous generations, maybe, but it's heavily mortgaged. But it's an opportunity for them to still continue to live because they seem to have lost everything. Or they go in a wagon with horses and begin to farm this land. And it's 3 sisters, a mom, and a dad. And the 3 sisters are Karen is the oldest one, Margaret is the middle one, and she is the narrator of our story, and then the youngest one is Merle. And it's just basically about the ups and downs of Margaret's time with a father who is angry and grieving the loss of his job, the loss of his manhood in many ways, the loss of his home, the loss of his position, just all of that. He's grieving that. Her older sister is not a kind person, and everybody between the father and the oldest daughter, the rest of the family, are very cautious in how they approach either of them and in what life is like when they are present in that life. And it is hard, but she wrote this so beautifully. There's this undergirding of tension from page 1 in this book. And it's because of the father and Karen, the oldest sister. But you don't know exactly what is going to happen as a result of this tension. And so you are walking as cautiously as the other 3 women in the story. I underlined and wrote quotes in my commonplace book so much during this story. When I was reading this with Priscilla, one of the things that she said was, it's one of those stories that is going to not only stick with us, but it's one that you just don't stop thinking about. And it's just amazing. The mother in this story was my favorite character, and she is just this very quiet, very stable woman who seems to have quite a faith in God, and also has an ability to just diffuse situations. She knows how to approach something without making it worse, without things blowing up. And I so appreciated whenever Margaret talked about her. Now, I will say that even though it sounds like the father and Karen are these horrible, unlikable characters, Margaret has such a love for both of them that it's hard to really dislike them. So this book, you guys, I cannot say it enough. Just go read it. It is so, so wonderful. I am gonna probably reread it within the next year. I just loved it. I just loved it. And that is it. That's all I finished. Currently, I am reading Joy in Christ's Presence. We are on chapters 8, 9, 10, and 11 this week. This has been life-changing. This has been life-altering. This book, it's hitting everybody that I know that is reading it. It is hitting them at just the right time, in just the right way. Everybody is having Holy Spirit speaking to them, and it's just been wonderful. Again, can't say enough. Go read this one too. Also reading Travels with Charley. Just started that one with Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot. We are doing that one together. And that's by John Steinbeck. It's nonfiction about his travels around America. Really enjoying it so far. I'm probably only about 30 pages in right now. So starting that one, I am reading The Reading Promise, Alice Ozma. I think that's who the author is. This is a pact that she and her father made when she was about 9 or 10 years old, to read to each other every single night for 1,000 nights. And they ended up extending that, and just kind of how that came about, what that was like, what it looked like, and the relationship between she and her father as a result of it. And I'm enjoying that a lot. Sea Room. I'm almost done with it. I am reading this with Camila from Hasty Books, and we both are having kind of this mixed bag of how we feel about it from chapter to chapter. We really like when Adam is, this is by Adam Nicolson, we really like when Adam is talking about kind of his personal feelings, his personal attachments, his personal stories about the islands. But when he goes into some of the history or some of the geology or some of the sciences behind things or that kind of stuff, we don't enjoy it as much. He gets a little wordy, and it feels like the chapters, all of the chapters, could be about 5 to 10 pages shorter. But nonetheless, we are really loving when we get those moments, and he gives us enough of them that it keeps pulling us back in and keeps us reading. So we are almost done. We should be done with that one by like Tuesday. So that's it, I think. Oh. I am reading Arrow's Flight by Mercedes Lackey. So I read book 1 in the Valdemar series, but wasn't initially going to continue. I wasn't going to continue. But nonetheless, this book became available for free on audio. And so I decided that I would go ahead with this book and see if I still didn't want to continue, since it was free. So I'm listening to that on audio. And that is everything. All right, you guys, thank you so much for coming and joining me today. It was wonderful to get to talk through these books. Did you hear about anything that maybe you would like to pick up and try? Is there anything that you have read that you disagree with me about or that you agree with me about? I will see you again in another video very soon. Like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to. Bye everyone.